It is a commodity that no steam engine can do without. But what do we know about the simple little black rocks that go to power these mighty engines? How do they work? And what is the impact of using coal as a whole? And more importantly, where does it all come from? Coal in itself is classed as a sedimentary rock and is mostly comprised of carbon. Millions of years ago, the Earth was mostly forest, tropical land and peat bogs. As the plant-based material died, it fell to the ground and got stuck in the peat and the mud. Normally on the forest floor, dead organic matter is exposed to the elements and decays, but if it lands in mud or a peat bog, oxygen and bacteria are prevented from the material. Eventually, the material is buried, and over time, immense heat and pressure is applied, and water, methane, and carbon dioxide are expelled. In its place is carbon, and this is the coal we use today. In effect, coal is simply mummified remains. Many people associate coal as the main source of fuel in the Industrial Revolution, and while this was true, coal as a fuel had been used for thousands of years. It wasn't really considered a fuel in itself and was first used to make the fuel coke. The coal would be heated in the absence of air to remove impurities and some of the smoke. This was done as early as the 1700s. In the early days of the railway, coke was the preferred fuel, and this brought some interesting legislation, and that engines had to consume its own smoke. Technically, this was not possible until the invention of the firebox arch, but because coke was cleaner than coal, it met the requirements. Over time though, the cost of coke was too expensive, and more engines began to run on coal. The legislation was quietly dropped, and coal became more acceptable. There is also no such thing as one type of coal. Coal can exist in various types depending on how much pressure was applied to it. Lignite, or brown coal, has a high moisture content which makes it difficult to store but is used in electrical plants. Subbituminous coal is a higher ranking band but has a lower sulfur content, but it too is difficult to store. This coal was used in the steel industry and for coke making. The next tier was bituminous coal. This was a higher grade and most common coal around. It has a high carbon content and low sulfur content and is ideal for steam engines. It is one of the easiest coals to store and obtain, but one of the most dangerous to mine. The final grade, anthracite, is the purest of carbon. It is also the most hardest of coal available. It is the most sought after type of coal, but unfortunately is also the most expensive, so not normally used commercially. In history, the first known uses of coal was in China 4,000 years ago. Ancient ornaments made from coal have been dated from this period, and it was believed that copper was smelted using coal as a heat source. It was around the same time Europe was discovering coal and was used in funerals for cremations. Romans used coal wherever they found it and was used in a variety of domestic duties. Throughout history, coal played a modest, quiet part of life. Coal was not really utilised in a commercial format until the 1800s, when the steam engine took over from the water wheel and railways took over from the canals. It was estimated that if coal had not been used, then the country would have run out of suitable sites for watermills, halting the entire revolution. It was the driving force for all sorts of machines, providing heat for steam generation. But coal is not without its drawbacks. The mining of coal has always and still is extremely dangerous, with about 90% of accidents occurring underground. The trapped coal seams also trap highly volatile and poisonous gases, and one small spark could kill. Fires are also common, and if a coal seam catches fire, they are near impossible to put out. A town in America called Centralia had to be abandoned when a coal seam caught fire deep underground in the May of 1962. The townsfolk were forced to abandon their homes after cracks and sinkholes began to appear, and people were falling ill from the toxic smoke coming from the ground beneath them. The fire still rages on today and is estimated to burn for approximately 250 years. The environmental impact of the burning coal was seen firsthand in the Great Smog of London in the 1950s. By then, nearly most households in London were using coal as their primary heat source, and industries used coal by the ton per second. An unusual weather pattern of cold weather and windless conditions had trapped the coal, pollutants and dust particles from chimneys, and it descended on the city. Thousands of people died through accidents and illnesses. The Clean Air Acts of 1956 and 68 saw a reduction in pollution and coal as households turned to cleaner gas alternatives, and the UK has pledged to phase out coal completely by the end of 2024. So if coal is to be phased out, what about steam engines? The smokestack of an engine as it charges through is one of the most iconic parts of the railway. So if the UK is to phase out coal, does that mean the end of our heritage lines? The answer to that is a straight up no. And no, we don't have to convert steam engines to oil, although that's a video for another day. The UK has the largest number of heritage lines anywhere in the world, but despite this, the carbon that the engine produces annually is less than 0.02% of the UK's emissions. The government has assured that because the steam history is integral to the UK and is iconic, steam heritage sites and steam engines are exempt from the new UK laws. This means that while UK coal cannot be used due to the closure of mines, coal can still be imported and used to fire these engines up and down the country. It's not all good news, however, as heritage sites are under pressure with rising costs, and with coal reaching upward of £200 per tonne. Unfortunately, it is the visitors that may see the increases in these fares. So how does coal work? Coal is made up of several elements: ash, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen and sulphur. It can also be described as carbon, volatile materials and ash. When it is heated, the volatile materials, that being the hydrogen, the nitrogen and the sulphur, are separated and are released as hot gases. This is why the smell of burning coal is unique. This leaves the carbon and the ash. The carbon is the fuel for the heat and burns completely, reacting with the oxygen to become carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, leaving the ash behind. Because coal is not completely pure, other elements may be present, including metal and rocks. This is what we call clinker, and usually ends up as a molten mess on the firebox bars. Clinker can be a real problem as it restricts the flow of air to the fire, so the purer the coal, the better the engine. Coal in some form will always be a part of UK railway history. Without it, literally we wouldn't be where we are today. While I applaud us looking for greener alternatives, there is nothing better than to wake up with the fresh smell of newly lit fireboxes with the steam creating a mist across the yard. There's nothing to describe it, and I'm glad that we still have this for many, many years more.